According to Pelicans fans, Trey Murphy, not Zion Williamson, is the real franchise cornerstone. Let's talk about why Trey might actually be the face of the team. It's Monday's episode of Locked On Pelicans. Let's go.
You are Locked On Pelicans, your daily New Orleans Pelicans podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to another edition of Locked On Pelicans, the daily podcast covering your favorite team, the New Orleans Pelicans and NBA, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day, available wherever you get your podcasts and available on YouTube. I'm your host, Pelicans Insider, credential member of the media, Jake Madison, at NOLA Jake on Twitter, here with you on this Monday, and we are going to be looking at the fan survey all week long, breaking down some of the biggest takeaways, the biggest themes. And today's show is all about Trey Murphy III because y'all love him and it makes sense. And look, honestly, Trey definitely has potential to be the future face of the franchise, the real cornerstone of the New Orleans Pelicans. So we're going to break it all down in today's episode of Locked On Pelicans. This episode is brought to you by Monarch Money. Take control over your finances with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKEDONNBA at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. And of course, thank you for making Locked On Pelicans your first listen today and every day. We are here Monday through Friday, the #1 Pelicans podcast, covering everything you want to know about this Pelicans team. So please subscribe wherever you get your podcast and join over 11,000 Pelicans fans on YouTube as well and become an everydayer. That means you listen Monday through Friday to the Locked On Pelicans podcast. And don't forget, you can watch us on the Gulf Coast Sports and Entertainment Network every single weekday at 10:30 a.m. and 5:30 p.m. So before we dive in, two quick notes here. I'm on vacation this week. This show is pre-recorded. The whole week's worth of shows are pre-recorded. If there's any breaking news in the week, not that I'm expecting any, we will react accordingly, or maybe I'll just get a short video from my phone at the beach or something along those lines. I did see the news about Jose Alvarado getting injured for Puerto Rico in the AmeriCup, being stretchered off. Looked really scary. Looked like this team's curse was still going on. But luckily, he said on Instagram after that he was okay. We'll see if he ends up playing, but doesn't appear to be like a long-term, potentially like season-altering injury for Jose Alvarado, which we are all very, very happy about. So let's get into the fan survey and some of the themes. We're going to kind of break all of this down throughout the course of the week here. But one thing that really was apparent, really immediately jumped out to me was y'all love Trey Murphy III. Y'all love Trey Murphy III, and the results are genuinely eye-opening from the survey. So one of the questions was, who's the most important player for the Pelicans outside of Zion Williamson? This was a write it in. 76% of the couple hundred responses, 76% said Trey Murphy III. There was another question in there that who is the most untouchable player for this team? This one wasn't, a fill in the blank, but you could add into there. Of all the guys who were most untouchable, Zion, Trey, Herb, Jose, or Jordan Poole, 73% said Trey Murphy is the most untouchable player on the roster. More untouchable than Zion Williamson, who came in at just 7%. Herb Jones was about 18% in there. Jose Alvarado was about 1.5%, and Jordan Poole was 1%. Think about that. 73% said Trey Murphy. Zion Williamson got 7%. Tomorrow's show is all going to be about Zion Williamson and your responses to him. But this is a genuinely eye-opening thing, right? Over and over again in this survey, Trey's name was the top answer. And when you have the question in there that was a writing question of what's the #1 reason you're excited about next season, so many people said Trey, or hoping Trey becomes a star, looking forward to seeing Trey take a leap. And I want you to think about all this for a second here. In a world where Zion Williamson is supposed to be the cornerstone of this team, fans are basically saying, nah, Trey Murphy is the heart and soul of this franchise. And honestly, it makes sense. Trey's fun. He's approachable. There's a certain level of charisma around him. So whether it's the dunk contest, some of the highlight reel threes, deep threes that he takes, or in-game dunks, just the way that he talks after games, engages with fans, people feel like they can connect with him in a way that Zion hasn't been, say, as accessible. And look, the better you are as a player and things like that, probably the less access there kind of is to you and some of that. But Trey's done a very good job of showing off his personality and just having the right kind of vibe around him, I think. And when you contrast that with Zion, where the story about him is much more complicated, right? Injuries, trade rumors, a lot of uncertainty. But Trey, he does feel like a sure thing. He's reliable. He's fun. He's very easy to root for. And that's why I think Trey Murphy can easily become the face of the franchise, not just because of his game. And that's certainly there. Look, last year, when he played, there were some injuries, and there's some injury concerns with him. 53 games, 21.2 points per game. That actually put him in at number 40 in terms of most points per game in the NBA. That's honestly like a pretty good spot for him to be in. Is what was the third option at times on that team, fourth option at times on that team. Now with injuries, he was capable of stepping up and stepping in and definitely did that. But look, he was averaging more points per game than De'Aaron Fox after De'Aaron Fox got traded to the San Antonio Spurs. At 21.2 points per game, you look at someone like Jaylen Brown, he's got one more point per game more than Trey Murphy did last season at 22.2, and he was an all-star. James Harden, who made third-team All-NBA and was an all-star, was at 22.8. When you look at that with the high level of three-point shooting, the fact that his game is growing, that he is still young, it's very easy to see why fans are kind of gravitating towards Trey Murphy and really believe that this is the type of player that can be a guy that you build around. Should they trade Zion Williamson, you feel comfortable that Trey's just, okay, you're number one now. When I did shows talking about, doing a reset, a rebuild, something along those lines with this team, one of the things that I had said here that I thought was important, right, is you don't trade Trey Murphy. You might trade Zion and be bad for a year or two, but then you just tell Trey Murphy, hey, you're the number one guy on the team, and you're going to get all the shots that you want and kind of use that to keep his level of buy-in. So because of his game, but then the bond he seems to have with the fan base, look, if you can win, if he can become an all-star, that's the type of player that fans really gravitate towards, love, and really want to go to the arena and watch play on a night in, night out basis. And I think everyone's expecting some really, really exciting things for Trey this season. So if he can really grow, and we'll talk about where he needs to grow in the next segment here, in the third segment, you feel really good about Trey Murphy, and clearly the fan base does. Like that, the biggest thing of looking at all the 25 questions that we had in this survey with everything, Trey Murphy, Trey Murphy, Trey Murphy. Like that was literally the biggest thing that jumped out to me. And those numbers of the 76% said he's the most important player outside of Zion. That makes sense. 73% saying he is untouchable. Wow. Right? Like that is really, truly something special and very, very cool to see. New Orleans loves Trey Murphy. I think he enjoys being here too. He's kind of doing all the right things. Let's talk about his importance to the team. That's coming up here next in today's episode of Locked On Pelicans. Today's episode of Locked On Pelicans is brought to you by Monarch Money. Most people can't name all of their financial accounts or even what's in those accounts. So whether it's a 401k, your mortgage, investments, you don't have the full picture, you can end up leaving money on the table. And that's why there's Monarch Money. It's an all-in-one personal finance tool that brings your entire financial life together in one clean, easy-to-use interface. It's on your laptop or your phone. And Monarch is built for people with busy lives. So if you've been putting off organizing your finances, Monarch's for you. It does all the heavy lifting. I tried it. It linked all of my accounts within moments, and it just shows you immediately clear data visuals, so you get smart categorization of your spending, realize I should stop buying as many Jordans as I do, and feel more in control of your money. So don't let financial opportunity slip through the cracks. Use code LOCKEDONNBA at monarchmoney.com in your browser for half off your first year. That's 50% off your first year at monarchmoney.com with code LOCKEDONNBA. And thank you for making Locked On Pelicans your first listen today and every day. We are here Monday through Friday, the #1 Pelicans podcast, covering everything you want to know about this Pelicans team. So please subscribe wherever you get your podcasts and join over 11,000 Pelicans fans on YouTube as well. And become an everydayer. That means you listen Monday through Friday to the Locked On Pelicans podcast. I see y'all. If you're an everydayer, let me know in the comments down below. So you just did the Locked On Pelicans fan survey. There's another survey. just a general Locked On survey because the network wants to hear from you. This is your chance to tell us what you like, what you don't, and answer questions about our advertising. Go to lockedonpodcast.com/survey to get started. Everyone who completes a survey will be entered for a chance to win one of 10 $100 Amazon gift cards. Again, that's lockedonpodcast.com/survey. You can also find the link in the show notes. We appreciate y'all helping us out. All right. For your second listen, Locked On NBA, we are covering all of Eurobasket. We're covering kind of the biggest stories around the association as well. So make sure you are subscribed to Locked On NBA wherever you get your podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. So let's continue talking about Trey Murphy III because we absolutely love Trey Murphy III. And y'all definitely love Trey Murphy III here, as we've learned from this fan survey. Again, it was genuinely shocking here. Last segment, we talked a lot about, call it the vibes around Trey Murphy, right? Like good vibes around Trey Murphy here. But Trey, it's not just about vibes. It's about, your play on the court. That's going to be the most important thing. Trey Murphy is critical to the Pelicans' success this upcoming season. Look, we can start with the obvious. This team is lacking shooting. On the court, he brings elite floor spacing to this team. This is someone who shot over, where'd his 3-point attempts go per game? 8.3 attempts from deep per game. Shot at 36%, which was kind of low for him, but that's making 3 threes per game. That's an incredible number. That is a court gravity that few players in the league have. For a team that desperately needs shooting, Trey is the guy that is going to consistently provide it. He can hit spot-up threes, deep threes, contested threes, you name it. That opens the floor up for Zion Williamson. That's going to open the floor up for Jordan Poole when he's driving and attacking, for Jeremiah Fears, who wants to play downhill. When Derek Queen comes back healthy, he's going to need a little bit of room to operate. Trey Murphy makes that all work. And it's not just the offense. You're seeing him grow as a defender. He's not a good defender yet, but he has the tools to be an elite defender. For a team that has kind of made defense their calling card the past couple of years, and it fell off the face of the earth last season, right? Trey becoming that versatile defender on the wing, can guard multiple positions, can switch, hang with wings, or has the size, the height to defend big fours. That's rare. That's exactly what the Pelicans need. When you look at Trey Murphy, he's kind of like a key piece because he just makes everybody better. If Zion's healthy, Trey Murphy's shooting makes the whole offense work. And if Zion isn't healthy, Trey has shown he can take on more of the scoring load himself. He has potential to be a number one guy. You don't get to being the 40th leading scorer in the NBA without having some talent there or with that being a fluke, right? He has shown he can definitely kind of be that number one guy for a team, or at least a really solid 2. Look, there's 30 teams in the league. If you're kind of looking at number ones, number twos, with Zion Williamson being the Pelicans' number 1. And look, Zion was great last year. He's the 17th leading scorer. Having Trey at 40, that's really good. That's really, really good in terms of just pure scoring. Trey has grown, right? He's not just a 3-point shooter that doesn't need the ball in his hands, so we'll touch on that in a minute. He's shown more of an in-between game, that he can play downhill and attack and be more than just a guy that dunks too. You've seen that in-between game from him, whether it's a floater, maybe it's a better layup package, a move to get by a defender. You have seen the growth from him from being a pure spot-up shooter to a guy that feels much more comfortable attacking closeouts. And when guys come out and contest him hard from 3, he doesn't mind putting the ball on the court, attack that closeout, and drive. It used to just be he was going to try and yam it on you with a massive dunk, but sometimes that wouldn't work. If a defender was in his way, he seemed stuck. There wasn't kind of a next plan of attack or what to do when his initial move was taken away. But over the past 2 years, really last year, you saw the growth where he's like, yeah, I can get around you. And now I'll finish with a little bit of finesse, or I'll get around you and still dunk it on down. He has grown in that way and shown that last year where Zion played 30 games, Brandon Ingram barely played. CJ was injured at times. Trey was the number one guy. And he did it. He lived up to that. I think when you look at his growth over the past couple of seasons, now that he's under his extension, you feel really good about it. He's only 25. This is not someone who's like near 30 or anything like that. He has shown the propensity to just be a very good player. He had 2 40-plus point games last season. Like, we know what Trey Murphy is capable of doing here, and it's pretty good. One against Denver, one against Boston. Those are both pretty impressive games. Boston's not a joke. Denver's not a joke either. And to light him up the way that he did, by the way, in both those games, he went 8 for 12 from 3, which is kind of interesting to see, has been really great. He can be the number one guy. So, when we talk a lot about Zion Williamson, that's tomorrow's show. Wednesday shows about how mid y'all feel about this team. Thursday, I got the whole plan and everything here. I'll run it down with you while we're talking here. 4 is going to be ownership in the arena future along with Willie Green. And then Friday is kind of the front office, Joe Dumars, and the direction of the franchise. So that's kind of where we're going with this week. There's probably going to be more the week after too. So next week, those games are impressive to see from Trey and the growth that he's showing. He can be the number one guy on a team. And I think that's what's so much fun about watching him play. The other thing is, if you have a healthy Zion, Trey doesn't need the ball in his hands to make an impact. And that's so important, right? That's going to make him the complementary piece to literally any sort of lineup and every sort of player around the league here. So I love what we see from Trey Murphy. He fits in perfectly. There's a reason every team wants to trade for Trey Murphy. We're about to release our Locked On Top 100 players. We'll tell you where Trey Murphy lands in all of that too. But all the reasons I just listed, right? Like, this is why fans say he's the most untouchable player. The value isn't just what he does. It's also how he elevates and fits in around everybody else around him. So if Trey plays at his peak next season, the Pelicans might not just be fighting for a play-in spot. We'll look at that on Wednesday, where you feel this team kind of falls in the Western Conference. They could be, maybe a lock for the playoffs. Not a top seed, but he could absolutely be in there. He could be kind of the swing piece between middling team and then good team or even great team, depending on the leap, there we go, that he takes. He's vitally important to the team next season. You'll have Jordan Poole. You're going to have Jordan Poole who can handle the offensive load too, but you always need to have it like 2 of those guys in the lineup. Zion goes down. It's going to be Trey Murphy and Jordan Poole as the top guys on the team, and you need them to live up to that, and both have shown they can do that. That's where you get some like Zion insurance in Trey Murphy and Jordan Poole, but we're focusing on Trey here. With his size too, being a drafted guy that fans have been able to root for the whole time, I think that's the type of thing that really like ties him to this fan base, just along with the personality that he has and everything as well. So let's talk about where he needs to grow, what he needs to work on. And by the way, you're seeing him do a lot of that this offseason already. That's coming up here next in today's episode of Locked On Pelicans. Today's episode of Locked On Pelicans is brought to you by FanDuel. The NFL season is here, and FanDuel is making sure you're ready for kickoff with a can't-miss offer. Right now, new customers can bet just $5, and if your bet wins, you're going to get $300 in bonus bets to use across the app. We've been running FanDuel on the show. They've been supporting Locked On for a long time. $300 might be the best bonus bets offer that I have ever seen on here, so it's a great time to be a new customer and take advantage. I love FanDuel because it fits however you like to bet. If you like the player props, that's great. Building a same-game parlay, you can do that. Or even jumping in live as action unfolds. Maybe there's an injury, it's going to shift the course of a game. You know what's going on while you're watching it. Make money off it in the FanDuel app. It's quick and easy, and the best way to add a little bit more energy to Sundays. So are you ready to play? Download the FanDuel app now by visiting FanDuel.com to get started. That's FanDuel.com to place your first $5 bet, and you're going to get $300 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins over at FanDuel.com or on the FanDuel app. And thank you for making Locked On Pelicans your first listen today and every day. We are here Monday through Friday, the #1 Pelicans podcast, covering everything you want to know about this Pelicans team. So please subscribe wherever you get your podcasts and join over 11,000 Pelicans fans on YouTube as well. And become an everyday. That means you listen Monday through Friday to the Locked On Pelicans podcast. And look, if you can't listen Monday through Friday, that's okay. I appreciate y'all making Locked On Pelicans part of your day in any capacity. So I appreciate y'all tuning in, even while I'm on vacation, pre-recording shows and everything here for you. Let me know what you think about Trey Murphy. What did you say about him in the survey? Let me know in the comments down below. For your second listen, Locked On Saints. Could the Saints have gotten Micah Parsons? That would have been cool. Ross Jackson talking about all things black and gold over at the Locked On Saints podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Make them your second listen today. So look, Trey Murphy is in line for a leap. Trey Murphy can become an all-star, but he's not a finished product yet. So let's look at, the areas that I think he needs to grow. And, number one to me is creating off of the dribble. I've long said this. He needs to create for himself just a slight bit more. He does a good bit of this, but a slight bit more is going to be really important here. Defenses know he's a shooter. The next step, beyond punishing the closeouts, attacking the rim, finishing through contact, all that can improve slightly. But it's, when you don't get the ball deep from three, or when you don't get the ball on the three-point line, how are they going to use you, right? When you have the ball in your hands, can you beat someone off of the dribble that's been defending you the whole way? Not a catch-and-shoot opportunity where they closed out hard on you. When you have a defender in front of you, can you get by them? Can you create some space for yourself? Trey Murphy does this. He does it mainly around the three-point line, by just taking deep threes when defenders aren't on him yet. That is creating your own shot, creating offense and using the space given to you. And look, those deep threes stretch a defense, break a defense, much more so than almost any other type of shot. But creating for himself a little bit more off the dribble, whether it's attacking the basket, driving, having a mid-range pull-up game, things like that. That mid-range pull-up shot is very different than a three-point shot in terms of the mechanics and how you shoot it. Refining that, working on that is an important thing. Good news. Trey's doing that. He works with Drew Hanlon, who's one of the top NBA skills trainers, works with guys like Jason Tatum and others, and is based out of Los Angeles, and it looks like Trey was out there now. I can tell you he was out there working with Drew last summer as well, and I think the year before that too. Trey invests in himself in trying to get better as a player and work with the right kind of people that can really help him grow. There's a little video of him kind of doing some of that work, and he was saying, it was like, what are you working on? It's like getting my mid-range shot off, adding, a deeper bag here of moves, of shot types to be able to score when I need to, when the defense is, collapsing on me, and all of those things. He said the goals this year are to win games, become an all-star. Love all of that. He's definitely working on creating more offense for him. If you want to be the number one guy, you've got to create your own offense a lot of the time. Trey Murphy III is definitely working on that. Second is going to be playmaking. I think Trey has grown in this. When you look at his stats over the past year, his assists per game were 4.5. That's by far 3.5. That's the most he's ever had. Went from 0.6 to 1.4, 2.2 to 3.5 last season. Those are really good numbers. If he can jump that up to 4.5, 5, not a massive leap, but enough of one, that's a really encouraging sign. If you're going to be the number one guy, face of a franchise, you got to create for others a little bit. Reading the defense is better when you draw attention, and being able to make the right pass can make him, and then thus this team, even more dangerous. Right now, he's certainly a weapon, but if he adds playmaking, he becomes much more of a star kind of player, I think, here. Third is going to be consistency, in my opinion. He has some stretches where he can disappear a little bit if his shot isn't falling. He doesn't need to be perfect, but you've got to be steady, because I don't know if the Pelicans are really going to be able to afford like long, cold stretches from their best shooter here. Working on the defense, the rebounding, you've seen him kind of say that rebounding is more of about a mentality and just going out and doing that. I like that he knows that it's about just hustle, and that when his mom called him out jokingly in a press conference, his rebounding got better. Sometimes that's just what it takes, is someone pointing this out to you. Improving a little bit on the defensive side of the ball is going to go a long way too. But if he takes kind of one step forward in one of these areas, or multiple of the areas we've said, he's going to make the leap to being a borderline all-star, particularly as, the number 2 guy on this team. I'd put him ahead of Jordan Poole right now, behind Zion Williamson. And I think that's one of the reasons fans are so invested in him. It's not just about who he is now, but the type of player he can become, a guy that was drafted, that they've rooted for since he was a rookie, to kind of be along for the ride with that kind of player who's also personable, has the right vibes around him, is just really fun. So that's why those numbers in the survey, the 76% saying he's the most important player out of Zion, 73% saying he's untouchable, Zion only getting 7% of that vote, was eye-opening, but not really. This all makes sense. We all love Trey Murphy, right? He kind of checks all the boxes with being beloved by fans, being an elite shooter, the guy that kind of makes the team work, and then just having that untapped potential. And fans clearly see it, and they said so in this fan survey here. You also saw Trey, really featured in the schedule release video, which I thought was really funny and a great little thing too. So outside of Zion, yeah, Trey Murphy's probably the most important player, but also the guy that fans are most excited to watch. I know the front office sees this too. They're not looking to trade him. Don't read into anything like that because, look, this is the guy that just simply might be the future face of the franchise, depending on what happens with Zion Williamson. And guess what? We're going to talk about Zion Williamson in tomorrow's episode of Locked On Pelicans. So we're going to get into that because that one is very interesting. I've got a great show planned for you when it comes to Zion. We're going to talk about your confidence in his health, Zion as a franchise cornerstone, and what Zion being healthy means for this team. These results were certainly something, and I'm excited to do this show. I'm literally about to start recording it. So let's wrap up here. That's going to do it for this Monday episode of Locked On Pelicans. As always, I'm your host, Jake Madison, at NOLA Jake on Twitter. This is the Locked On Pelicans podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I appreciate y'all listening. I'll be back with y'all tomorrow to keep talking about the survey, and we are going to be looking at Zion Williamson. See y'all then.